Welcome back, friend. It has been a while. Alright guys, it is time to talk about the second BluGuitar amp that I've got here in my studio. This time it's the Iridium. It's the Mercury's meaner brother, aimed squarely at the guys who value tight, high-gain metal sounds over the more vintage-based rock sounds that the Mercury dishes up. If this is your first time visiting, welcome. I take all sorts of cool guitar gear onto the stage with my 90s and 2000s rock cover band, and I put those pieces of gear to the test in real-world working musicians' environments, and then I bring them back here to the studio to show you guys. If you like the content, consider subscribing to help my channel grow and to get this content out there to more new viewers just like yourself. And if you don't care about anything else I have to say beyond this point about this amp, check out the timestamps down below to get straight to more playing. But just like with the Mercury, there's a lot more that meets the eye with these amps, and I encourage you to swing back around to hear what all this thing has going on. Okay, so like I alluded to, this is not my first time with this amp, and I've really wanted to get my hands on another one to spend some proper time with the amp and really get to figure this thing out. So I reached out to BluGuitar a while back, and Thomas himself answered, and he agreed to send me both the Iridium and the Mercury to try out on loan to review. So a huge thanks to Thomas for helping make all of this happen. Now, for those of you who have been subscribers for a while, you may have already seen the video that I did on the Iridium that I used to own, but It was more of just a kind of a quick playthrough video rather than a proper review. The one that I used to have, I unfortunately had to sell before I could give it a proper review. I had to sell it, the Axe-Fx 3, a couple of guitars and things like that to help raise money, to help pay for a new car. I always regretted having to sell this, this amp, so I'm glad that I've been reunited with it and gotten the chance to really kind of take more time and get to know it and figure out what all it can do. All right, let's quickly-ish run through some of the main features of this unit and rather go into all the details about a lot of the stuff. I encourage you to check out my review of the Mercury, kind of up here somewhere, where I spent more time talking about all the features and the functions and the tricks that both of these units have up their sleeves that you might not know about. For this review, I'm going to try and stick mainly to the bullet point features and the functions. All right, so just like the Mercury, this is a 4-channel amp. It has a clean channel and it has the vintage, classic, and modern drive channels. The clean channel is big, it's got big headroom, big nice sparkling cleans, and the 3 drive channels draw heavy inspiration from amp companies like Rev, Engl, Diezel, maybe Bogner if I had to guess. And the Mercury by comparison is much more rooted in the modded and vintage Marshall sounds. As you can imagine, they are 2 completely polar opposite flavors of gain from the two different amps. Now, when the amp is operating in standard switching mode, this first switch toggles between clean and whichever of these 3 gain modes you have. The second switch toggles on and off the boost, and the third switch here toggles reverb on and off. Now, the reverb is different in this amp compared to the Mercury. It's more of like a hall reverb compared to a more traditional spring reverb that is in the Mercury. Now, there's a second way to operate both this and the Mercury. If you run the amp in what's called preset mode, you can assign any gain channel to any of these 3 switches, and you can have it engaged or disengaged with boost and reverb on any 3 of the channels. So it's kind of like having 3 different presets assigned for each switch. Now, if you're running it in that preset mode, you can connect your standard 2-button foot switch to the MIDI jack back here, and you can use the first switch on the 2-button switch to toggle between whatever drive mode you've got selected for your preset and the clean channel, so you can always have a dedicated go to the clean channel button. The second button on the 2-button switch will toggle on and off the boost, you know, regardless of how you have your presets configured. It's sort of like a master switch for going to the clean channel and another master switch going to engage the boost. BluGuitar also sell a very small little foot switch called the One Control, and it lets you adjust like a power soak, which is sort of like an attenuator-ish type thing, as well as toggle a solo boost if you want more volume, and a gain boost if you want more of that as well. Now, just like the Mercury, this amp also has a built-in noise gate, and it has a more gentle clamping setting and a more aggressive clamping setting, depending on how much gain you're using, or you can have it not running at all if you want to use your own noise gate. It's also got an effects loop, and there's a switch on the very bottom of the unit that has a 10 dB cut if you need to use that, and there's a switch on the side to go between serial or parallel mode, depending on which type of effect you're using with the amp. Last but not least, there's a row of little mini potentiometers on the side of the unit, and those let you adjust how much gain boost you get, and there's a tone and volume control for the classic and modern channel, and then a tone control for your clean channel. And these knobs they let you equal out the volume for each channel and also the top end, so that if you're switching from one gain mode to another, you don't have kind of this big discrepancy in those areas. Now, unlike most tube amps, this unit and the Mercury, they can be run without a speaker cabinet attached. This amp has a recording output with built-in speaker simulation on it, but unlike the Mercury, on this amp, you can disable the speaker sim and just run a pure line out signal to your own impulse response loader if you want. And for reference, you can do that on the Mercury using the effects loop send, but with the Iridium, you get to retain the ability to use the effects loop while also running the direct signal out. There are a couple of other features like running in half power mode. There's MIDI control. You can adjust the gain parameters, so each channel operates with less gain if you want, and I feel like I kind of specifically need to mention these because this unit in particular, it has a lot of gain on tap, and at first glance it might seem like it's more one-dimensional than the Mercury, but you can have each channel operating at a lower gain level to give you a little bit more flexibility with the built-in gain control knob itself. Like if you want to dip more into like the vintage rock sounds with this unit. Personally, I really did enjoy running the Iridium at the lower gain setting. It's not low gain, it's just lower, and then using an external boost like the OCD here to sort of push that saturation back up to really high gain stuff. I think it's a good way to get some of those in between gain sounds, and it really lets you sort of personalize the feel and the sound how you want it to be based on the type of boost that you put in front of the amp. Like, we've all got our preferences on that, so it's nice to be able to sort of pull back the saturation from the amp a little bit and then bring it back up with our own drive pedal. Now, in addition to this, if you have their big remote one switch, you can actually customize the gain for each drive mode. So instead of running all three drive channels at a lower volume, you can have it set individually per gain channel how much gain you want. So I think that's really cool. And the best part is that you don't have to always have that big remote one switch attached to it, because it saves the gain amount for each channel in the unit itself. And if you don't need the big remote one on stage and you just need to gig with this, it remembers those settings and lets you just use that without having to carry the remote one with you on stage. As for the half power mode, I think Thomas says that this thing is capable of running wide open at 120 watts full power. So being able to operate at half power ensures that if you've got something like a 112 with maybe a vintage 30 in it, or a 212 with some greenbacks, you can safely crank the amp without worrying about hurting your speakers. It's also really great if you're playing at home or a smaller venue, because I feel like the sweet spot for both the Amp 1 units is right around this noon to 2 o'clock-ish area on the master, and at full power, it is insanely loud, like I said in the Mercury video, and being able to sort of cut back that a little bit, it makes it a little bit more viable in situations where you don't need crazy high volume, but you do want that extra mojo and saturation from the power section really cooking at those higher levels. Now, as for MIDI, if you want to keep the Amp 1 tucked away in like a rack unit or something like that and do all your switching from a MIDI controller, that's also a huge bonus for a lot of guys. Okay, let's touch on the tone controls briefly and then I will get back to playing. The tone controls on these things, they don't behave like normal amp tone stacks. They adjust different frequencies based on the drive mode that you're on. In addition to this, changing one frequency doesn't alter the other, so this gives you like a lot more precision with the sound, letting you dial in exactly how much bass, mids, and treble you want without having to do that back and forth dance as you adjust them like you might find yourself having to do on a more traditional guitar amp. The bass and treble control also interact with the power section, producing what's effectively like a resonance and presence frequency. So they're all extremely powerful, and it results in you having that much more control over the sound of your amp. All right, let's hear some more of the Iridium. Now, just like with the Mercury video, rather than sit here and twist a lot of knobs, I'm going to just focus on a few of my favorite sounds from the unit, and we'll hear it with the OCD boost again. And this time I have got the flashback delay. I would say I dusted this thing off, but I didn't even do that. I just hooked it up and I was like, ah, that sounds good. I completely forgot that I had this pedal. So we've got the flashback in the loop today, and I've got the Schecter EA Classic here. I really am liking this guitar, and I actually was doing some auditioning before hitting record with the V. I kind of wanted to use the V, but when I plugged this one in and went back and heard the recordings back and forth, this one's meaner than that. So it looks mean and it sounds mean, but this one's got a little bit. There's something going on with the mid-range on this thing that's really, really good. And so we're gonna use this today, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get going. Oh, and just like the Mercury video, this is going into the Splawn 412 with a Scumback speaker mic'd up with a 421 and an Audix i5. pictures on my wall are shaking with those big, like, woofy palm mutes. This thing is so loud. Like, y'all need to understand how ridiculously loud these things can get. So as you can hear, compared to the Mercury, this is a completely different animal. The power amp in this thing has been engineered to produce a much tighter and more percussive and more immediate note attack with less compression and more punch in the low end, but it doesn't sound sterile or lacking in character doing all that. Although all three gain modes have a lot of gain, each one has its own unique vibe and character, and it lets you dial in and really refine that voice and gain structure that fits your playing style the best. I really do like the more raw and unpolished character of the vintage mode when the gain is cranked, but I also really like the tighter and low end and the really nice mid-range sounds that the classic mode has, which based on what I saw in his Academy of Tone video number 126 is very similar to channel 3 of a Diezel VH4. Also in that video, he had an Engl Savage 120, and when he was doing the A/B comparison that he had with the Iridium, and it was on the Modern Gain channel, and the Engl in the blind test, the other guy in the video, he was kind of having some struggles determining which was the Iridium and which was the Engl. He did a better job of picking apart which was the Diezel and which was the Iridium, but I think that's mainly because the Diezel has a very, very, very distinct feel and sound to the structure and the attack. All right guys, let's talk about how this thing performed on stage in the post-gig report. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I take just about every single piece of gear that I review on this channel onto the stage with my 90s and 2000s rock cover band, and I want to see how this stuff holds up in a real-world gigging musician's environment. Now, as a lot of you guys know, the stage can quickly make or break a piece of gear, and as I mentioned in the Mercury review, Thomas is huge on playing live, and as good as these pieces are in the studio, you know that being great on stage was a top priority for Thomas when he was making these things. Now, I used both BluGuitar amps at 2 different shows. For the first show, I ran these amps into my Mako 112 cabinet with a 100-watt Boss Waza speaker, which is basically like a 100-watt greenback. In my Mercury review, I alluded to both these BluGuitar amps lacking some punch to the sound that my 50-watt Kraken really didn't struggle with, and I used the Kraken during the third set. Now after that show, I brought both of these amps back home, ran each one into this Port City 212 as well as the Splawn cabinet, and I had a completely different experience with very dramatic results. Both of the amps sounded much better going through the 212 and even better going through the 412. Like, these things love big loud cabinets. And it had honestly been like over a year since running my original Iridium into the Splawn cabinet, and up until that recent show, I had only been running these 2 amps into my aux box, so I do admit that was a bit of a bad preparation. It was bad prep on my part, but after realizing that both of these amps punched way harder and bigger in a bigger cabinet, I brought them both back to the second show and ran them into a white box open back 212. Much different experience. Each amp was hitting much harder, much louder, and much bigger sounding, and just overall more enjoyable on the stage. Now, in addition to this, these amps, like I said earlier, they are incredibly loud, extremely clear, and very articulate on stage, and the clean channel has a huge amount of headroom. So if you're a gigging musician and you need something loud, powerful, tons of gain, and an impressively small footprint that can easily fit into a carry-on bag or onto your pedal board, these are very compelling units, and they have very, very few competitors in this sort of marketplace. Okay, so it's time for a conclusion, and who do I think that this unit is for? Thomas really swung for the fence when he voiced these amp channels, and if you're a fan of high-gain, super saturated German metal amps, this unit is kind of like a greatest hits of sounds from those types of amps, but at an absolute fraction of the price that those things usually go for. At least here in the United States. You may be different over in Europe, I don't know. In my review for the Mercury, I went through my thoughts on these units compared to real tube amps, and rather than rehashing all of that, I'll say, in kind of summarizing, that these don't feel exactly like full-size tube amps, but it's important to note that they don't feel worse than full-size tube amps either. They're just a little bit different. These units do an excellent job of delivering all of the great qualities of tube amps, such as reacting properly to playing dynamics, cleaning up the right way when you roll back the volume, and delivering these nice complex harmonics in the sounds in ways that solid states, they just can't really do that, at least none of the solid state amps that I've played. The high gain saturated structure of this unit, it feels extremely good under the fingers, whether it's really tight percussive rhythm playing or like fast lead work like the legatos. They feel really good. And like I mentioned in the Mercury video, that's one of, if not the biggest things that I personally look for in a really good stage amp. If an amp feels and reacts the way that I want an amp to do on stage, and it has the right saturation to the gain structure, I really don't care how much gain it has, because I can always take care of that with a boost pedal or something like that. So yeah, two absolutely amazing amps. Thomas is a genius, and I think he really cracked the code to making tiny devices like this sound and feel like a big full-size tube amp. And if you've been gigging with a big tube amp and you're tired of dragging it out to shows and it's getting old, you're looking for a smaller solution that's fairly affordable and it doesn't sacrifice tone or feel, this amp and the Mercury, in my opinion, they are unbeatable in this size and this price range. If you want to try this or the Mercury, I will have affiliate links to Zound's website down there in the video description, as well as links to several other products that I've used in this video to make this happen. And I'll also put a link to that Academy of Tone video where he compares this amp to the Diezel and the Engl. Again, those affiliate links, they don't cost you guys anything extra, and the small commission that I earn from the sales, they really do help support the work that goes into making all of this content happen for you guys. Another big thanks to Thomas for lending me these amps to make these videos happen, and just a big thanks to all of you guys again for hanging out and watching these videos. Stay tuned for the next video where I will be comparing this amp and the Mercury side by side, and we'll see how it sounds. Sound good? All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.